Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear students, Assalamu alaikum and welcome back in our lecture number 4. Our today's lecture is very much important as we are going to discuss the economic systems in the world, and we are going to compare the Islamic economic system with the most dominant system at the moment, that is capitalism. And we are going to discuss some features of capitalism, and then we are going to compare Islamic economic system with the capitalism. So before we go into the details of our today's lecture, let's have a look of our previous lecture. And this is very much important that you get the points fresh in your mind, because these are the points, these are the principles using which you are going to compare with the capitalism. So in our previous lecture we discussed the principles of Islamic economic system. That was money as a potential capital. We discussed in little detail that money itself is only piece of paper, it is only a claim, and it is only a document which certifies that the holder of this piece of paper is liable or is eligible to claim such and such amount of asset. So, but in case of Islamic economic system, money is a means to the capital. It becomes capital only when it converts into some other form. Like you purchase some assets, you purchase some commodities, only then it becomes a capital. Otherwise, it's only a piece of paper, and it's also known as fiat money. And prohibition of interest, which is the main feature of Islamic economic system or Islamic financial system, because the whole financial system, the whole financial markets will operate under this principle that interest is zero. So when we call interest zero, it has lot of implications. For example, if we are going to forward any capital or any of our savings as capital to anybody, we are not going to loan it. We are not going to lend it to earn some interest on it. We are going to become an investor. So we have to find some partners. Either we are going to start our own business, or we have to find out somebody who is going to become partner with us. So there are two arrangements, as I mentioned earlier, that was musharaka, the regular partnership, and mudarba. And also there are many other products of Islamic banks, and we will discuss them in detail in our forthcoming lectures. And then risk sharing. Another key feature, that when we say interest is 0%, it means we are not going to earn any assured increase on our principal amount. So what we are going to do is, we are going to invest our principal amount in any sort of business, and out of that we are going to earn something. So when we invest our capital in any venture, in any business, it means we are facing the risks present in the market. And we have to compete with other businesses. We have to add some value into the economy. Only then we are going to earn our profits, or maybe we suffer some losses as well. So risk is there. So, and also I told earlier that it's a general phenomena that the higher the risk, the greater the reward. And then sanctity of contracts. So when interest is zero, then we will become partners with our investors, and we ourselves become investors. Whatever we deposit into banks, that will be invested, and out of that we are going to earn something. So everything goes on contracts. We make contract with our bank enters into contract with the clients. So there are contracts at each and every place. And sanctity of contracts, it's very much important in Islam, because this is our obligation to fulfill our promises. And in Islam it is very much strict, because we will be asked on the day of judgment about our promises. And then Sharia approved activities. So when we enter into any business, then we have to select those businesses which are allowed in Islam. We have to take care of halal and haram. So there are so many things which are not allowed in Islam: pornographics, the prostitution, gambling, alcoholic businesses, and bribery. So many things which are not allowed in Islam. And then individual liberty. With all these things, individuals, they have full liberty to engage in the business activities, earn profits, and they can engage themselves in any halal business activity. And then right to own property. So when you involve into businesses, or you may inherit the property from your father, from your parents, and there is no limit on your property. As much you want, you can have, but provided that you earn it using halal means. And you can keep the property, but it comes with some conditions, because like we have some obligatory taxes on it, like zakat. And also we are encouraged to do charity, sadaqat. And this mechanism will make sure the wealth circulates into the economy. So when wealth circulates in the economy, it means just like blood in the body, if blood circulates well, the body is healthy. Just like that, if wealth is moving in the economy, if wealth is circulating hands, it means the economy is in a good shape. And then economic inequality and charity. Islam allows that people can be unequal regarding their economic conditions. People can be wealthier and people can be poor. So, but the thing is that socially everybody should be equal. And the difference, difference in the wealth, it doesn't lead towards the classes. It doesn't mean that the wealthier is a higher class and a poor is of a lower class. The ranks can be different, and it is only because the people can take others, the poor, into their labor. So labor and services should be available in the market. And then charity. So the wealthier people, they are encouraged to pay their obligatory tax like zakat, and they are encouraged to pay charity. They are encouraged to pay zakat as well, and also sadaqatul fitr. So there are so many fronts where Islam encourages to do charity. And it means that we are actually going to circulate the wealth. So when we are going to circulate the wealth among all the people, so there will be potential among the people. So people can capitalize on their potential and they can add value to the economy. And then social equality. Economic inequality doesn't mean that people should be unequal socially. Allah says that the best person or the most respected among you is the one who is more pious. This is the standard. And then circulation of wealth. Islam ensures circulation of wealth. So the people, they are wealthier, people, they are poor. But the thing is that the wealthy people, they have to pay zakat, and also they are not allowed to hoard their wealth. They have to use their wealth to start business ventures. They have to bring their wealth into the economy. So when it changes hands into the economy would improve. It will add value into the economy. So circulation of wealth is also ensured, and this is among the key principles of Islamic financial system. And now the learning outcomes of today's lecture is that after this lecture you should be able to understand the major economic systems in the world, their advantages and disadvantages, and the position of Islamic economic system against the prevailing economic system. So in our today's lecture we are going to discuss capitalism, its features, its different forms, and its advantages and disadvantages which have been discussed in the literature, and then we will compare it with the Islamic economic system. So first of all, why do we need an economic system? Economic problems of mankind have always been a key issue in the history, and every nation and every society on the face of the earth, they have tried to evolve certain system where they can operate in a smooth manner, where they can operate, where they can move around, where they can deal among each other, and they can achieve their motives, where they can achieve their objectives. So that those systems, they are always evolved into the economies, in the societies, and sometimes they are under the divine guidance, and sometimes people, they themselves, they evolve such systems. For example, capitalism evolved without any divine guidance, like without any guidance from Quran or Bible or any book from Allah. And then like socialism and communism, and there were so many other systems, but these are the major economic systems. And also the quest to resolve the economic problems have resulted in many economic systems, but they have either completely failed or partially succeeded in finding an equitable and balanced solution. Islam also provides an economic system to keep the economic life of the individual and the nations as a whole on the lines of equity and prosperity. So just like other systems like capitalism, socialism, communism, Islam has also provided an economic system. So the principles we have already discussed. So these are the principles which have been given to us by Quran and Hadith. It means the creator of this universe has designed an economic system for us. So this system should be better than any other system. So let's compare it with the prevailing economic systems, and also keep in mind that the prevailing economic systems, either they have completely failed, just like communism, and they are only partially succeeded in solving the economic problem, like capitalism. Under capitalism, economies thrived, economies grew, GDPs grew up, the per capita income increased, but the thing is that there was a polarization between the rich and poor. Wealth was accumulating all the time towards the rich. And in the forthcoming slides, we will see how the wealth distribution is at the moment in the world. And also, again, why do we need an economic system? To engage in economic activities peacefully. It's vital for our survival, and to earn the reward of one's labor, expertise, and efforts. So if we have a proper economic system, only then we can standardize that the reward for different kinds of labor will be such and such. The labor who is working as a mason, how much he will earn, or working as in the industry, how much he will earn, or worker who is providing some services, how much he should be paid, what should be the hourly rate for hourly wages. So all these things are only possible when we have a proper system. So that's why we need an economic system. And then a marketplace that determines our demand and supply phenomenon in a free and fair environment. So only if we can have a free and fair market, then we can determine that how much is the things and commodities and goods and services they are demanded in the market, and how much to be produced, and how much to be imported, and how much should be exported. So all these decisions can be made possible only if we have a proper economic system in place. And then a system that ensures labor rewards and eradicate the curses like slavery and victimization. Again, if we have a proper economic system, only then we can eradicate such problems like slavery and victimization. And discussing the importance of the economic system, we continue. Again, a system that accommodates the innovative ways of doing things, like trading over internet. There are so many innovative things, there are so many innovative products, and this was only possible because we could have some economic system prevailing at the moment. Because if we don't have proper economic system, we will not be able to determine the demands of the market, and if we know the demands of the market, then there will be competition among the people. So when there is a competition among the people, the manufacturers, the producers, the business people, they will innovate their products. So you can take the example of computer. These machines, in the beginning, they were so big, they were huge, but the speed was very little. And then gradually they improved their speed, they decreased in size, and nowadays we have a computer from a room size, now a computer that can fit in our palm, and even smaller than that. Now we have smart mobile phones which they are serving as computers as well. And this was only possible because we could have an economic system in place. And then to ensure self-satisfaction, achievement, and security. So if we have a proper system in place and we perform hard work, we do something innovative, we do some inventions, and then we get the response, we get the recognition from the market, from the system. And this is only possible if we have a proper economic system in place, and it will lead us towards satisfaction, achievement, and security. And to raise the quality of life and living standard to a level where nobody would feel deprived. So this should be the main objective of any economic system, that where each and every individual doesn't feel deprived, and they have at least a minimum standard of quality where nobody should have to extend their hands for any favor from others. So they should be getting food, shelter, security, and medicine. All these cares should be provided to each and every individual in the economy. Now, what are the major economic systems prevailing in the market at the moment or in the world? First of all, capitalism. It is the oldest in these four systems, what we have listed down here, and then emerged the socialism, and gradually it converted to communism, and then Islamic economic system, which is quite old, at least 1400 years old, but it has resurfaced again. It was successfully being practiced some centuries ago, but nowadays it is again surfacing, and lot of people, they are being attracted to this system, and many of the European and American businesses, they have adopted so many things from the Islamic economic system. So let's first of all discuss capitalism. What is capitalism? Because we are living in a capitalistic society, it's quite easy for us to understand what is a capitalism. It's a system based on private ownership of factors of production. What we know as land, labor, and capital, and the entrepreneur, these are the factors of production. So the entrepreneurs, they can own the factors of production like land, labor, and capital. And then a system based on economic freedom. So when the individuals, they can own the factors of production, then they are free to do whatever business they want, to produce whatever they want. They have the market in front of them, and they can determine the demands of the market, and accordingly they will be producing their products. And a free market economy that will determine the demand and supply of the system and rewards based on individual skills, ability, and effort. So the entrepreneurs under the capitalistic system, they will use the factors of production, they will produce the goods to sell into the market, and they will use the services of labor, and the ability, the skills, and the efforts of the labor will determine how much they should be paid as a reward, or how much salary or wages they should be getting. And it's a system that operates more close to human psychology of ownership and liberty. So because this system provides liberty and there is no limit on ownership, so this is very much close to human psychology. This is our instinct that we want to own as much as possible. We want to put in our deposits in our bank accounts as much as possible. And this is our instinct. So this system is very much closer to this instinct. Whereas there is a difference in Islamic economic system, and we will discuss it in later slides. And then there are so many types of capitalism. Some of them I have listed here, and it depends on the degree of competition, role of the government interventions and regulations, and scope of public ownership. It all leads towards the various form of capitalism. The major one, they are the laissez-faire capitalism, welfare capitalism, and state capitalism. Laissez-faire capitalism it's an economic system where there is no intervention from anybody, no regulations, no intervention. Every individual, every business have full liberty, and they are allowed to do whatever business they want, and there is no restriction on their activities. It's an economic environment in which transactions between private parties are free from government restrictions like tariffs and subsidies, with only enough regulations to protect property rights. Property rights should be protected anyway. These are the basic ingredients of every successful system. So, except property rights, there is complete liberty, there is no restriction, no regulations, no taxes from the government, and this is laissez-faire capitalism. And whereas the welfare capitalism it refers to a capitalist economies that include comprehensive social welfare policies. Alternatively, welfare capitalism refers to the practice of businesses providing welfare services to the employees. And nowadays, we have seen a lot of regulations, lot of talks about the corporate social responsibility as well, and mostly in the Europe such system is in practice. And then state capitalism. It is characterized by the dominance of state-owned business enterprises in the economy, as it is clear from the word state capitalism. So it is something which is run by the state, which is regulated by the state. So there are big corporations, they are controlled by the state, and it's an economic system in which commercial economic activity is undertaken by the state with management and organization of the means of production in a capitalist manner, maintaining the conditions of wage labor arising from centralized ownership. So it's a system which is bit controlled, and it is controlled by the government, and most of the organizations and the bigger corporations, they are under the government control, they are owned by the government, and they operate under certain restrictions. So these are some of the kinds of capitalism. And now we are going to discuss the advantages and disadvantages of capitalism. So there are so many advantages and there are so many disadvantages as well. So the proponents and the people who oppose such system, they have given their arguments. So let's discuss the advantages first. The proponents of capitalism argue that it creates more prosperity than any other economic system, and they claim that its benefits are mainly to the ordinary person. So because this capitalistic system, there is liberty and there is no limit on ownership, so the people, they are free to engage in any kind of business activity. So according to their potential, if they are provided certain opportunities, they can create value, they can add value to the economy, and the businesses, they can grow from the personal businesses to big corporations, and we have seen so many examples of it. And the smaller businesses, they merge together and they become bigger corporations. And now, according to the proponents of capitalism, they produce such figures that it really contributes toward the economy. So now let's see what's the world GDP per capita between 1500 and 1998. In these almost 500 years, it is expressed in 1990s international dollar. And if you can see here, this is the per capita income, and this graph is derived from the data in table B18 of the world GDP and table B10 of the world population. It's published in the World Economy, a Millennial Perspective by Angus Madison, OECD Paris. It was published in 2001. So you can see here, in 1500, the per capita income was around $500 per annum, and then it continued same until 1700 years, and then up to almost 1820, and then the industrialization started. So after the industrialization started, there is an exponential growth in the per capita income. You can see here, and with the industrial revolution, capitalism was established at that time. So you can see here the income started increasing, and now it is supposed to be around $6,000 per annum. And the figures after that, they are missing here. So we borrowed this graph from the website. The link is also given here. And you can see the merits or the advantage here of the liberty provided to the people and their right to own properties. So if you control the liberty, then maybe people would not work that hard as if they could do to achieve something. If they have their own objectives, but there are certain restrictions, then they may not be able to achieve their objectives. So if they are not able to achieve their objectives, so then there is no attraction to do that job. So since they could earn a lot and they could contribute a lot, so we can see a great improvement in the per capita GDP. And we have the example of China also. that People's Republic of China's nominal gross domestic profit between 1952 to 2005. We can see here under the system from 1952 until 1980, there was it remained almost same. It was touching zero. It was very low. And then from 1978 actually, the market-based economic reforms, they started, and gradually their GDP started increasing. And now that is increasing at an exponential pace. So they provided more liberty to their people, more liberty to their entrepreneurs, and people, they felt recognition, they got some reward of their efforts, and they did hard work, and the government policies were always supporting them. So they got some huge investment into the country, and their GDP was increasing all the time. And then advantages of capitalism, we are continuing with that. Increasing GDP per capita has resulted in improved living standard. So as it is clear that even if we look in our own lifestyle from the past, we have improved our lifestyle. We have improved our living standard, but at a certain cost. We have huge inflation, we have so many problems, unemployment, but at the same time, our living standard has also improved. And then availability of basic needs of the society, that is food, housing, clothing, and healthcare. So it was only made possible with so much research, with so much innovative ways that people now they can build high-rise buildings so that they can provide some accommodation, they can provide some facilities to the offices, they can provide some innovative ways of constructing new buildings, and clothing and healthcare. There has been so much improvement in the healthcare. The average life of individuals has increased in Pakistan and all over the world. And the mortality rate among the infants, the mothers, it has also decreased. So that was only made possible because of the new infrastructure, new hospitals, and these things, they were all constructed because of some motives behind that. The doctors, they provide their services with the incentives to get some fee with that. And the more opportunities for the entrepreneurs to initiate new business ventures. So the governments, they provide some more facilities under this system to the entrepreneurs with the lower cost capital, like lower interest rates. They get capital and they start their new business ventures, and they can contribute towards the economy. And if we can summarize different aspects of advantages, one is that right to own factors of production. Individuals, they can own factors of production, they can use them in innovative ways, and they can approach the markets, they can introduce some new products, they can innovate the things, they can invent the things, and it can add value to the economy. And then profit maximization. So this is again an advantage in capitalism, that people, they can maximize their profits. It can be taken in a negative sense as well, that on any cost, for example, in case of life-saving drugs even, people, they charge very high profits. So profit maximization is possible under the capitalistic system, and it comes at the cost of life even. And then economic freedom. There is complete economic freedom, there is free market and competition, and if the competition is healthy, it can lead toward economic growth and innovation. But if the competition is not healthy, we will discuss it in the disadvantages of capitalism, then it can lead toward the destruction of the small businesses and certain values as well. And also capitalism evolved banking and financial institutions and markets for smooth international transactions. So whatever financial system we see at the moment, it has evolved under capitalism. So there have been so much sophisticated infrastructure that nowadays transactions, they have become very much rapid. Just in minutes you can complete your transactions, you can send your balances from one account to another account just by sitting on your computer and by logging on to your account, and you can do certain transactions. So everything has been made, all such progress has been made under the capitalistic system. And now disadvantages. So first of all, the main disadvantage is that it has created classes. It has created two classes, which is the people with wealth and the poor. And there is a middle class as well. And there are so many classes. So we can see in this figure, there are some disparities in distribution of wealth. So these are some figures, facts and figures from the American economy. It's the actual US distribution of wealth data from Holder and Ariely 2011. So you can see here the wealth, more than 80% of wealth is owned by only 20% of the population. And then in the middle class, they own about 5 to 6%, and they are about 60% of the population. And the poorest of them, they own only about 1 to 2% of the total wealth. So this is the wealth distribution in a capitalistic society and in America, in US, where capitalism is performing quite successfully, maybe better than any other part of the world. So you can see here the disparities in distribution of wealth. And this is only because there is an inherent default in the capitalistic system that people, they have no restriction on accumulation of wealth. They are free to accumulate, they are free to own as much property as they want, and they are not forced, or there is no restriction, and they are not encouraged to help poor. There are certain exceptions. There are certain exceptions. For example, there are so many corporations, there are so many individuals who take up so many good things. They are famous in charities, and wherever there is a disaster, they approach there, they help the people, they help the victims there. But in the overall system, when we see a lot of disparities in wealth distribution, and this is because the people, they want to maximize their wealth, they want to maximize their profits, irrespective of what is happening to the lives of the people, to the lifestyle of the people. And this chart shows that there was a class assignment, and the students, they were given the task to distribute the wealth among the population. So there were 10 different groups of students. This study was conducted by Lincil Urbano with the different student groups. The link is given here. You can go to the link and you can watch by yourself the whole essay. You can read it. So the different students, they had their different understanding, and according to their understanding, they distributed the wealth among the people. So it has been divided among the richest, 20%, then the next 20%, the rich people, and then the middle class, who are not rich, not poor, and then these are the poor, the next 20%, and these at the bottom, these 20%, they are the poorest. So the one of the groups, here it is that 50% mark. So one of the groups, they distributed wealth like this. About 40%, they thought 20% of the people, they hold a wealth of, in total of 40% of wealth. And then about 20% next group, about 20% next group, and likewise. And the next, no group gave more than 60 or 70% of the total wealth to the top 20%. So you can see here the maximum wealth that was allocated to the richest people, it was about 60%. And then if we look at the even place here, if we divide the wealth evenly, each group of 20% will be getting this much share. But the actual situation is that this much of the wealth, that is about 80 to 90%, is held by the 20% of the top rich people, and then about 7-8% is held by the rich people, or in the upper middle class, you can say. And then only a small proportion of the wealth is for the poorest segment of the society. They are the 20%. And these figures, they are from America, where the capitalism is operating quite successfully. But if we generalize the figure all over the world, then let's see what is the situation. So even before we go to the overall situation in the world, these are few more statistics given about the US economy. So wealth distribution in the United States in 2003, you can see here the top 1%, they hold 25.8% of the wealth. And then 5% of the people, it is about 50.7%. And if we add further 5%, so that 10% of the total population, they have 62.9% of the total wealth. And then the bottom 90%, they hold about 37.1% of the total wealth. So you can see the accumulation of wealth between the rich and the poor. So only the maximum number of the population, that is 90% of the population, they have smaller share in the total wealth. And this class, maybe they are the laborers, and they are the workers providing different services, and they are unemployed people, they are the people who can't do any jobs. There may be some women as well. So this segment of the society is, you can say, is the most neglected or the most deprived part of the society. And then global distribution of wealth. Those figures, we can say they were quite fair, even if the disparity was so huge. But still, the bottom part of the population, they also had something. But now if we look in the global perspective, from all over the world, if we accumulate the whole wealth and then divide it between the rich and poor, then let's see what is the situation. So you can see here, top 0.001% of the population, they have 30% of the total wealth. And then the next 0.01%, they have 19% of the total wealth. So you can see a bigger part of this pie goes to only 0.001%, that is 1 person in 1,000. Okay, then the next 1% in 100 people has 19% of the global wealth. And then the next 0.1%, they have 32% of the total wealth. And the remaining 99.9% of the population in the world, they have 19% of the total wealth. So you can imagine the distribution of wealth, how much disparity is there. This is a completely unfair distribution of wealth. So you can see here that 81%, that is this much part of the wealth, that is 81%, belongs to only 0.1% of the total population in the world. And the majority of the population, that is 99.9%, they hold only 19% of the total wealth in the world. And discussing the disadvantages, the exploitation is there in the capitalistic system. Because of that wealth distribution, there is so much exploitation. Labor is exploited by the capitalist. And this is all clear that labor and the capitalist, the employer and the employee, they always have differences with them. Employees, they are always asking for increase in their wages. So there is some level of exploitation, and it is done by the capitalist. And then farm worker is exploited by the landlord, the people who are working in the farms, and we know them in our countryside, people call them as kami kamin, despite the fact that they are the people, because of their efforts, we eat vegetables, food and different stuff, but they are not even respected in the society. And poor is exploited by the rich. Rich, they can buy, they can purchase anything they want, and the poor, they are not capable to purchase the luxuries of life, and they are always looking in a strange way towards the poor, to the rich. And then servant is exploited by the master. The relationship between the servant, between the rich and poor, between the labor and the employer, they are always tense. And then people are exploited by the rulers. And we are the perfect example of this statement, that we are always being exploited by our rulers. And the wealth is the objective of everyone through fair or foul means. In a capitalist society, wealth is the objective, wealth is the motive, that is the goal. So the people, they will achieve their goal, the businesses, they will achieve their goal of profit maximization, whether it comes at the cost of environment, it comes at the cost of the people's life, or it comes at the cost of anything. Monopoly is also one of the disadvantages in a capitalist society, where small businesses, they can't compete the big businesses. So what they do is, most of the time, the small businesses, they merge together to become a bigger organization. And when there are so many big organizations operating in the market, they monopolize the market, because they can achieve the economies of scale, they can manufacture the products at the least cost, and then they can sell it into the market at minimum profits as well. So the result is that the smaller organizations, where the input cost is greater than the bigger organizations, so gradually they disappear. So when there is no competition in the market, it leads towards the monopoly. So when the monopolies are established, then the businesses, they can charge higher prices. So inflation takes place, and with the elimination of smaller businesses, unemployment takes place. So monopoly is also one of the features of capitalism. And now we are going to compare the Islamic economic system with the capitalism. In our previous lectures, we discussed the characteristics of Islamic economic system based on Quran and Hadith, and then we derived the principles of Islamic financial system. So now we know the principles of Islamic financial system, and now we are going to compare it with the capitalism. What are the good and what is bad in the systems? So first of all, right to own property. In capitalism, there is no condition how much property you want to own. It is on your discretion. You can earn more, you can own more. There is no problem in it. There is no restriction in it. You can earn as much profit you want, and it leads to the concentration of wealth in few hands. So as I showed you in our previous slides, you could imagine from the different charts that wealth is accumulating among the rich, and poor, they are getting poor all the time. So the accumulation of wealth, because of the that exploitation takes place in the capitalistic societies, the people who are rich, they are getting richer and richer, and they are getting more and more property, they are earning more and more profits. Whereas Islam allows the right to own property, but it comes with certain conditions. For example, we are not allowed to charge extra profits. We are only allowed to charge some decent amount of profits. And then there is a unique concept in Islam that Allah is the owner of everything. Every property, every wealth is the ownership of Allah. So we are only the trustees. Whatever amount of wealth we earn, whatever profits we earn, whatever properties we gather, they are in the real owner is Allah. So we are the trustees here. So we are only here to use that trust. So Allah says to us that in our wealth there is right of needy people and also the deprived people. So we have to distribute the wealth among those people who need that. And for that arrangement, Islam has devised the mechanism of zakat and encourages charity or sadaqat. And then economic freedom. So in capitalism, every individual has an unbridled liberty to engage in any kind of profitable business, moral or immoral, such as gambling, prostitution, smuggling, black marketing, profiteering, hoarding, speculation, fraud, adulteration, etc. There are so many other things as well. So in capitalist societies, the people, the businesses, they can go as far as all these bad things, and the wealth becomes the religion and faith, which leads to the selfishness, hatred, mistrust, and there are so many more bad things we can associate here. And then, whereas in case of Islam allows freedom but within bounds of Sharia. Islam allows the freedom but the boundaries are set. We know what is halal, we know what is haram. All these things what we mentioned earlier, the bad things, they are not allowed in Sharia. So halal and haram are made clear in all economic activities: interest, bribery, embezzlement, prostitution, sale of wine, narcotics, short weighing and measuring, then gambling, speculation, monopoly, extravagant spending. They are all not allowed in Islam. The extravagant spending, this is again discouraged in Islam. And then there are so many things. For example, if we bribe the people, it means we are going to forfeit something, we are going to grab something which we are not entitled to do that. So all immoral things, we are not allowed to do that. No business is allowed to manufacture or to produce certain things which are not good for the society at large and also for the individuals. Narcotics, prostitution, gambling, every such thing is not allowed in Islam. So there are limits of halal and haram. We are only supposed to do halal businesses. We are not allowed to engage in any haram activities. Then monopoly, as we discussed earlier, capitalism leads towards the monopoly. The greed to earn more and more profits leads towards the bigger and bigger businesses, and when the businesses they grow bigger enough, they can control the markets and they can charge higher prices and they can eliminate the smaller businesses, which has lot of implications like inflation, unemployment. And then if we look into the Islam, in Prophet ﷺ says, whoever monopolizes, he is a sinful. So monopoly is an act of sin. So in Islam, it is forbidden. So when there is no monopoly, there is free competition in the market, there are new businesses entering all the time into the market. So the success rate of smaller business organizations will be higher than in the capitalistic form of businesses. In capitalism, almost more than 85% of the small and new businesses, they fail within the first 3 years of their life. So whereas Islam encourages competition and it discourages anything which is immoral, which is haram, and that can lead towards inflation or unemployment, those practices, they are not allowed in Islam. And then institution of banking and interest. There is a huge difference between the point of view of capitalism and Islam. Capitalism encourages the banking system, what we are seeing at the moment, with certain interest rate into it. The people who save, they deposit their savings into the banks, and the banks then forward those savings as a loan to the kept to the people, to the businesses. And again, the people who have big businesses, if they take any loan, it is easier for them to take any loan from the banks, and they become more and more successful. Whereas a person who doesn't have good repute regarding their financial position, and they don't have enough mortgages, they don't have enough properties to pledge, they are not even to get loans from the banks. So the smaller businesses, they are discouraged right from the beginning. So, and then Islam categorically condemns the institution of interest, and every business which has the phenomena of interest, it is not allowed in Islam. So what does it mean? Whatever wealth we have, whatever savings we have, that is all capital. We cannot deposit our saving in any account and we earn a fixed interest rate on it. Whatever savings, whatever capital we have to invest it in the market, either through the mechanism of banks or directly into the market. We become partners with the people, or we provide our capital and use the services of entrepreneurs. And then there are different mechanisms to share the profits. And exploitation, as the accumulation of wealth leads towards exploitation. As I mentioned in our previous slides, that the rich exploit the poor, employer, they exploit the employees, and the landlord exploit the laborers. So all these things are there in the capitalistic societies, and we watch them in our daily life. Whereas Islam strictly prohibits every tool of exploitation, such as usury, bribery, gambling, etc. The weaker classes of the society, like women, orphans, slaves, laborers, tenants, consumers, they have been protected against their exploiters through legislation by Islam. For example, the properties of orphan. Quran clearly says that don't devour properties of orphans, rather do trade. So instead of targeting the properties using illegal means, Islam encourages us to engage in some business activities such that we can earn profits and we can achieve the motives, we can achieve our objectives. And the distribution of wealth. So we could see that under capitalism, distribution of wealth was not fair. In 99.9% of the people of the whole world, they own only 19% of the wealth, whereas only 0.1% of the total population in the world, they own also more than 81% of the total wealth. So you can see the disparities in the distribution of wealth. So whereas Islam ensures fair and equitable distribution of wealth and economic resources, system of zakat and sadaqat is in place, hoarding of wealth is prohibited. So the system of sadaqat and zakat, they will ensure that at least certain portion of wealth will circulate among the society. So when it will circulate among the society, people will be getting their basic needs, and at the same time, people, they are not allowed to hoard their wealth. So when wealth is not hoarded into the accounts, into the lockers, then that wealth will be used to start or to initiate any business activities. So when the business activities are initiated, job opportunities are created, so the deprived people, they can go and work into those organizations and they can earn their livelihood. So there will be less inflation into the economy because the capital is available without any interest rate, and it is being used to initiate different business activities. So the products will be cheaper and the unemployment will be controlled, inflation will be controlled, and interest rate, as it is the mechanism of Islam, that it will be zero. So these will be the feature of Islamic economic system. So it will ensure the smooth circulation of wealth into the economy. And in our today's lecture, let's summarize it. We discussed different economic systems in the world, like capitalism and Islamic economic system. Islamic economic system at the moment is a new phenomena in the world economy, but it is getting popular all over the world. the growth rate of Islamic financial system is better than the conventional banking system or the conventional financial system. And capitalism and its different forms we discussed. And then we discussed the advantages and disadvantages. And we saw that there has been exponential increase in the per capita income of the population. Whereas we discussed the disadvantages that were the exploitation, monopolies, unequal and unfair distribution of wealth, and etc. And then we compared the capitalism with Islamic economic system briefly, and we saw that all the ills of capitalistic societies, they are addressed in Islamic economic system. And then in our forthcoming lecture, we are going to discuss the socialism and Islamic economic system, and then we will summarize that how Islamic economic system is better or feasible than the systems of capitalism and socialism or communism. So that's all for today's lecture. Inshallah, see you in next lecture. Till then, Assalamu alaikum.